Welcome everybody to another speedrun episode. We're already 1750. Just thinking about how quickly these climbs tend to happen. Like when I'm 1600, I think it's going to be forever until we're 2000. Suddenly we're well on our way. Then when we're 2000, I'm like, it's forever until we're 2300. And suddenly it's time to start a new speedrun. So enjoy the intermediate level while it lasts. I think this is really where we played the most instructive games for the widest possible audience. So hope you enjoy. Hope we get some instructive games in. And we are facing a perk. Well, Pierce. Never mind. We are facing a unnamed. You know, it's like when you take the exit from the freeway and Google, like whatever maps you use just says unnamed road. It's like unnamed opening. So this could become a Hippo, which is the name usually given to the double fianchetto setup, or it could become like some troll opening. Now, we've faced this by now a million times across the speedruns, these various versions of like nonsense openings. Our strategy, broadly speaking, does not change. We're developing naturally. I've shown people various different setups, various ways that you can maximize your advantage. I think the simplest is just to play knight c3 and then to go from there. a6. Okay. So there's like two big decisions that you can make here. The first is whether to play c4 or not. But since we're not 1d4 players, I think that we'll refrain from this move. The second big question is whether we play f4 or not. And I'm always very bearish on, on whether to play f4. I don't love this move unless you really feel like you can knock your opponent out in the center. I like to play without f4. In this case, however, I do want to play f4 because from an objective standpoint, it is a really good move. And I want to give people an understanding of how to play different types of positions, even if I personally have my preferences. So black is now fianchettoing the king's bishop. So he's playing a kind of Pierce down a couple of tempi. What I will say, and I'll sort of flesh this out a little bit after the game, we do not have to prevent b5. Even if black were to play properly in the Pierce, oftentimes you can allow the pawn to get to b5. It is not a big deal. It is not worth spending a tempo playing a4. We just keep developing that f3. And then the light squared bishop always in this line comes out to d3. This is just sort of the standard Austrian attack setup. Castles kingside. All very straightforward. Okay. So we have a great position. We have a good center. Black is sort of moving toward a Hippo setup. So black setup is not horrendous. Like, we've faced worse. It's also not very good. And it's definitely something that we want to seek to punish in the early middle game. Again, when you have a position like this, there's going to be multiple ways based on your preferences to prosecute the advantage. Like, there isn't just going to be one correct, super strictly correct way to play. I like this maneuver a lot that we've implemented in many openings. Queen to e1. I really like this move because it's a flexible move. We're not really committing to anything. But we're really eyeing this queen h4 move just like you would in the Grand Prix attack. Here in an instructive moment, what would you pause the video if you're watching and you ask yourself, what would you play here with white? I bet you that the majority of you would just automatically go bishop e3. In my opinion, there is a more challenging move, which is actually to play e5. The logic is, okay, we are probably going to be attacking on the king's side. That's probably going to be the area of attack. So, broadly speaking, closing the center or keeping the center semi-closed is a good idea. But also the positional benefits of this move are tremendous. We're forcing, we're locking this bishop out of the game. And we're really exploiting the fact that we played f4. So d takes c5 is great for us. Obviously, we need to take with the d pawn. Otherwise, we drop the pawn. This bishop is out of the game. And I'm already looking at the d file. I'm looking at the d file because the black queen is very cramped. So if we can quickly get a rook to that square, that looks really awesome. I'm also looking at the f6 square, serious weakness. We can play knight e4. In fact, let's start with knight e4 because we're also stopping the move knight b4 by doing so. And I really like moves that combine aggressive ideas with prophylactic ideas. Those are really annoying for the opponent. I think black is going to go queen e7. That would be my guess. But I'm not Idris Uthman. Knight cd4. Okay. So again, white's position is borderline winning here. I think, and one very kind of underrated training tool, I think, that you can use in terms of like working with engines fruitfully is at various points, and like when you're analyzing a game, ask yourself like to roughly estimate the evaluation of the position. What do you think the assessment is in terms of like computer assessment? Then turn on the computer and see how many times you're in the correct ballpark. And if you're completely in the wrong ballpark, or you think like black's winning when white's winning, that's a good chance to, potentially figure out some blind spots in your understanding. So this would be a good moment to like collectively guess the eval. I'm going to guess +2. So this is move 12 white, and then after the game, we're going to check. Okay. Let's go C3. Yeah, let's go C3. Kicking the knight away, covering the D4 square, and of course, if he trades on F3, the rook will then defend the bishop. Now, this is a risky kind of move that needs to be supported by very concrete thinking, because we're flirting with disaster. Of course, I'm not, but I've looked at it carefully. But when you allow discoveries of this sort, you got to make sure that you've considered all of the knight jumps, including moves like knight B3, which actually probably I would play with black if I had to generate the most practical chances. He goes back to C6, great. Now, like newer players, they will very often like blunder the bishop in this case. Remember, when you push a pawn, okay, bishop is undefended, let's bring it back. We have all the time in the world. And I think we're ready to chase this knight out of F5. Let's go G4. Now, nobody should be watching this thinking, wow, like, why is he pushing pawns in front of his king? Look at black's position. Like, there is no hypothetical universe where if we attack with any kind of even like remote competence, we're going to pay for this kind of move. Let's go H3. Also, black is weak in the C5 square, which we don't even probably need. I mean, this is just, black is in Zugzwang, basically. Like, this is, now it's like +5, probably. And we have so many ways to play, but I like patient build-up. So, like, what's our next move going to be? Actually, there is a semi-tactical move here that we could play. I think that's very strong. Yeah, I think this move is just winning, actually. So the patient approach is bishop E3, obviously. Bishop E3, rook D1, nothing wrong with it. But there is a more tactically minded approach, I think, to go for a quick knockout. So G5 is the right idea, but it's the wrong order, right? So G5, the problem with this move is it gives black this big stronghold on F5. And if we then give a check on F6, I'm, of course, not going to take your knight. So G5 is not a move you want to play unless you have to. So think about what I said. I said wrong order. What does that mean? Wrong order of what? That contains a hint as to the correct move. So F5 actually is very strong as well, I think. Yeah, but you don't even need F5. Okay, folks. So the idea proposed is G5 and knight F6. Start with knight F6 check. Exactly. Start with knight F6. If black takes twice, then we play G5, picking up the knight. Otherwise, we're threatening queen H4, winning on the spot. Or F5. So black basically has to give up this. And I think this was the only move. But this is a full extra piece and all the dark squares. And, okay, queen G7, I think, is forced. But he might resign. Yeah, this is probably +5 at least, yeah, or so. This type of position, because black is down a piece and potentially getting mated in the long run. Okay, queen H5 is what I'm expecting. Again, to remind you of something, one of the basic points of the speedrun is like my comments are generally geared toward the level that we're currently at. So for 1750, I'm talking in a way that I think will be targeted to 1750s approximately. So if you're 1750 and you're watching this or in that ballpark, you should feel like if you had this position with white against me with plenty of time, like in a classical game, you should feel like you would be able to convert like at least 50% of the time. And you should feel pretty comfortable, like, okay, I know where the pieces are going, and I feel like I can do this pretty much with my eyes closed. Let's go queen F2 to set up bishop C5 and coordinate the rooks. So I want to remind you of a topic that I haven't really broached since we were beginner level, which is when you are up a decisive amount of material, right? there's these two approaches to winning, broadly speaking. The approach one is what's often taught. Trade all the pieces, go into an endgame because it's easier to convert. Approach number two is like use your extra piece to play for checkmate. And the correct approach is usually going to be a balance of the two. Here, I'm basically not even thinking about just like the first approach, because if you look at the dark squares, like it's a crime against humanity to just like seek out the queen trade with a move like queen h4. This is a move that will prolong the winning path by like a million years. Instead, we have so many like exciting attacking opportunities here. Bishop e4 is an excellent move. I like bishop c5, asking the queen politely where it's going to go. And it may seem like we're sending the queen to a better square, but now I'm going to go knight g5. And I have this nasty little idea to drop back to e4. And then the queen really starts feeling uncomfortable. Yeah, this is not great for black. If knight e7, we have an even better move. Think about what you're going to play if black goes knight e7. Black might go e5 also, but that opens up this diagonal. Yeah, this is where I'm tempted to start. Yeah, rook a c8. Okay, guess what? If you want to make a power move, just like, let's dance together. Like, you're not going to do anything. I'm going to get my last piece into the game. Why not? Because why not? Why do we need to rush anything here? Enjoy the moment. You're winning. Enjoy the process. Rook d5. Okay, we can go knight e4 as planned. I think knight e4 actually would have been stronger here, but I wanted to prove a point. Because now he has queen d8. Not that that changes anything. So, how do I think about this position? What's the goal? What is the ideal for white? The ideal to me is if we can manage to put a knight on f6, that's going to be devastating. What's preventing the knight from getting to f6? Black's queen. How do we chase away black's queen? Well, we can't. Like, can we set up a hypothetical? Well, if the rook were gone, we would have rook to d1, and the queen would potentially be trapped. What's the move? The move is bishop b3, trying to force the rook away from the d file. Now, on my opponent's turn, what I'm doing is I'm sort of, okay, never mind. Scratch that, he's played rook h5. Okay, very instructive moment if he plays queen h4. Instructive moment if he plays queen h4. Okay, so I just said that queen trade is a crime against humanity. What I meant by that is not like the act of trading queens should be ruled out in any situation. It's like seeking out the queen trade at the expense of your attack should be, is not the optimal way to win. Here, the queen trade is in service of the attack. The attack continues in the endgame. We're actually likelier to deliver checkmate here than we would be with the queens on the board, because the rook comes in and checkmate is like a couple of moves away. We're going to take f6. It doesn't matter that he's taken h6. This is still going to be checkmate very, very quickly. Actually, knight d8, there's a beautiful mate. I really hope he goes knight d8, but I don't think he will. Reverse psychology. Otherwise, bishop e6. I mean, anything wins. This is just like rook d1, rook d7. Bishop f8 also wins. Yeah. Yeah, black has spent this entire game and like, I don't understand the prevalence of these types of openings at like the, relatively decent level. Just like masochism to play like d6, e6. Don't do that. If you're serious about your improvement, you should play real openings. Yeah. Like meme openings are fun for a game or two here and there, but they should never be your main opening. Okay, I hope he resigns. Like this is kind of dragging on. King f2. And we have checkmate in 1. Very nice. Okay, just a moment. So there isn't much to say, really. I think I explained most stuff during the game, but we have a couple things to check. That point where we guess the evaluation. So I don't really have much to say on the opening. Essentially, like the actual Pirits is knight f6, knight c3, g6. This is the Pirits. And here, like if you play f4, this is called the Austrian attack. This is like for several decades now considered really the most principled way to fight for an advantage. I don't think it's necessarily the best move, but it's sort of the most aggressive. And there's a ton of theory here. I won't delve into it right now. Separately, there is an opening called the modern where black plays g6 on the first move. Now, the modern is like the cousin of the Pirits, and it can transpose into the Pirits if black plays like d6 and knight f6. But very often, black delays the move knight f6 and plays a6, which is sort of what our opponent tried to do, but he played this horrid move e6. And here, I mentioned early in the game that we don't always need to stop b5. This is a great example. Like knight f3 here is best, and we just continue developing in spite of black's expansion on the queen side, because a move like b4 is not going to cause any damage. It's like pinching a dinosaur. In fact, it helps white mass our forces on the king side. The knight wants to be on g3. So, in fact, like very often, white will play a4 to provoke b4 in this position. In any case, black plays this like really weird setup. We go for the Austrian attack setup. And here I think I explain e5 pretty well. Anybody have questions on this move e5? Pretty easy to understand. It's not a big, like, super committal move. One thing that I did overlook, I'll be honest, I did miss that black can play knight b4. This does sour my, like, enthusiasm for this a little bit. Knight b4 is a slightly annoying move because white will be forced to give up the bishop. Here, there's actually a pretty instructive maneuver. You can play bishop e4 and then go back to d3. Of course, the point is to induce d5 and close up the center completely. And although this may look ugly, it's actually a very standard structure like in the Jabava London. This is actually not a bad structure at all. Why? Because if black carries out the typical plan c5, white has this lovely, reformation, not the Protestant reformation, but the pawn structure reformation, dc and d4. And now we can like safely continue attacking on the king side. White is much better. White is much better. Black did not play this. Black played DE. DE. And where was the moment where we wanted to move 12? So at this moment, we wanted to check the evaluation. I said +2. It is, I'm going to let the computer reach depth 25, which is like a standard depth. And then I will read out the evaluation. It's plus 2.6. It's actually completely winning for white. And I played c3, which is decent. Actually, c3 is an inaccuracy. The best move was the immediate g4, apparently. The best move was the immediate g4. Trade on f3. And, like, you're not afraid of knight d4. You don't care. You lift the rook, and then you just play for checkmate. Like, black has no moves. So let's say b6. You just play c3 to chase the knight away. And now you can choose your pick of mating strategies. But g5 is game ending immediately. Queen h4 is coming. Just completely winning. It's funny. The reason c3 is inaccurate is because what black could have done, black could have taken on f3. And who can tell me how black at least slows down the progress of white's kingside attack? If you're a King's Indian player, this idea should be familiar to you on the other flank. And so in the King's Indian, just as a quick aside, like one of the most common ideas, for example, if we take like the line that I play with black, if white plays d5, the knight travels to c5, and then you play a7, a5 to prevent b4. And it's the exact same idea on the other side of the board. They play h5. And if white plays h3, you play h4. So at least this pumps the brakes on the speed of white's attack. If black is much worse. Still, it's very uncomfortable, but at least black can try to complete the development here. Whoa, sorry. Once our opponent allowed g4, the game was over. So like at least here, h5 would have been more resilient. And once g4 is played, the floodgates open and black is completely paralyzed and dead lost. I think the rest is fairly self-explanatory. Yeah, knight f6 check is a nice move. This is a nice move. I actually, if I remember correctly, let me see. I remember a game where I carried out a very similar idea. I just like randomly remembered this game, and maybe I'm misremembering, but I feel like I executed a very similar concept. So this tournament was the tournament after I became a GM. Like after I got my third norm, I played this tournament and I was like in a really good mood and I was playing well because I didn't need to get norms. And in round one, I'm playing a 1700 and we reach this position. So in this position, I play knight f6. Whatever, a camera's not on, doesn't matter. I play knight f6 and black plays knight to d5, trying to smoke the knight out of f6. White to play. See if you guys can find really strong move here that wins the game. Like I win the game in 3 moves. How? So do not go g5. This is the same mistake that somebody proposed in our game. This gives black the f5 square, and you're shut out of the kingside. You don't have a way to get the queen into the attack. Not good. You need to be more refined. The correct move is queen to g5. Yeah. Because if black takes, hopefully you can see now what the point is. It's the same concept. At the end, you have this fork, and then you take the knight, and then you even take the pawn. My opponent played rook c8, and now there's knight h5 check, the secondary idea, and black resigned. So hopefully you can see the parallel. Yeah, so same concept here. And if black doesn't take on f6, you just go g5. All right, next game. Oh yeah, last thing. If black had gone knight d8, there's just a nice little mate, rook f8 and knight e8. It's just a very pretty mate, I thought. Yeah. All right, next. Let's not dwell too long on banalities. What will we get this time? We have white again. Nice. Okay, we're going to get an alapin. We're going to get g6. Okay, sure. Okay, so d4. Okay, so another hippo guy. Well, okay. You guys already know the drill. Now, I will say here, some people will be tempted to play d5. Again, since you're an e4 player, presumably, you don't necessarily want to transition into like a Benoni structure because, like, conceptual. It's not that d5 is bad. It's a decent move, but the close center positions are just harder to play. So I would prefer just developing pieces. You should know that the bishop belongs on d3, and now we're just going to proceed with our development in very straightforward fashion. e6. Man, black is asking for it early. Well, this creates a giant hole on d6. Giant hole in d6. So we tailor our next developing move to the drawback of what black just did, which is bishop f4. I just want to stick a bishop on d6, honestly. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. Why not? Just put a bishop on that square, make it hard for black to breathe. Okay, that's a free pawn. But I feel like we can maybe go for more. On the other hand, why would we bother? It's a 10-minute game. Let's start by taking, then we'll see. And then we'll think about it. If black takes back, we'll think about it. Okay, so one observation that's worth making here is that we are in no hurry to take this pawn because black cannot defend it. Black is not capable of defending this pawn on the next move because the queen is tied down to the knight. And then, move like knight a6 just runs into queen a4. However, black is potentially able to go c4. So if we're making a move, it would be nice if we also took the sting out of c4. And there's a move that checks all the boxes here to me, which is knight b to d2. Knight b to d2. And what boxes does it check? Well, it checks like the classic maneuver box of getting the knight to c4. Now, ultimately, what I'm trying to set up is I'm trying to get a situation where we can take the pawn on c5 without relinquishing control of the d6 square. So if we do it now, black can go d6 and the elephant is off of black's chest. I'm going to try to put the knight on c4 first. Now we're threatening to take on c5 and maintain like total control of the board. Yeah, but queen b3 was fine also. Yeah, knight c6, yeah, perfect. Bishop c5, and we're threatening knight d6. In fact, you can pre-move knight d6 essentially. So d5 here, we are not bothered. It still allows knight d6. Yeah. So this is just, again, Terrible position. All right, that's it. Black suffers catastrophic material losses here. I mean, the best that Black can do is give up the exchange. But given that Black's already down a pawn and the position's in shambles, it's a pretty easy conversion. How do you like them apples? Okay. So again, I'm going to deploy and mobilize the queen, which is just always an a priori good thing to do. So, some stuff that I'm watching here, the X-ray against our bishop, but also we're X-raying the rook, so Black cannot move the knight. I can totally see that blunder being committed. Now we're going to play ED, obviously. The reason I didn't take here is because that would have let the knight join the game. But the moment the knight moved away, it offers us a perfect chance to engineer a takeover, usurp. That's usurp the e-file from Black. Fabi used that word randomly. I was like, whoa. Fabi said usurp. We are usurping the file. That's such a good... In Russian, the word also exists. Uzurpировать, to usurp. Instead, you can use it as a synonym for use. I'm going to usurp a pen rather than a pencil. So here there is a classic mate in 2. You should know this pattern. Bishop f8, bishop h6. Let's go home. That's how... When I said the conversion's going to be quick, I meant it. Like, I could feel this coming. I don't have pre-move enabled. GG. Really one concept won us this game, which is the d6 square. And I've talked about the d6 square in the Sicilian a lot. It's a very important square, and it is the big reason why, as I repeat to no end, combining g6 and e6 in the Sicilian or anytime you play c5 is exceedingly, exceedingly dangerous. And in general, flirting with a hole on d6 like this leads to disaster 9 times out of 10. There's many famous illustrations of this. I've used this concept to win quite a few games. There's a really famous game where Black plays like a pathetic opening for a GM. Like, this game, I think, is highly overrated because, like, Black is a GM who plays just, like, atrociously. But it's very... it's famous and it's instructive. Nevertheless, Petrosian versus Pachman, who was a GM from Czechoslovakia, which doesn't exist anymore. And neither does Pachman. So, yeah, so this is a King's Indian attack by Petrosian. It's nothing to write home about. So Black plays e6, which is fine. Nothing wrong with this move. But now you're supposed to just like put a pawn on d6. And Black doesn't do it the first time. But then Black doesn't do it the second time. He makes this autopilot move, castles. And that is actually a serious strategical mistake. He should have just frickin' played d6. What did Petrosian do to make him pay for it? Yeah, so Petrosian plays e5 and he says, I'm going to make you, burn you for this. And of course, the e-pawn can be easily defended. Now, Black does play d6, but as a result of the trade, Black's position is kind of in shambles. Like, the bishop's terrible. The pawn on c5 is now a serious weakness. White's coming out really quickly with his pieces. And Black was essentially just like paralyzed very, very quickly. Knight c4 was a nice little intermezzo by Petrosian. And this game is famous because of the combination that ended the game on move 20. Petrosian misses it the first time and plays rook e4, but finds it the second. Who can spot the sequence? Actually, the impressive move is not the first, but the third. The first move is quite obvious, I would argue. The third move is what makes this combination famous. So queen f6, king f6, sure. Now the second move is obvious, bishop e5. Sorry, no, not that. But what does Petrosian do here to trigger resignation? Bishop g7, bang. Essentially taking away the escape route and setting up like 800 mate threats, such as f4 and bishop f3, or f4, knight e5 and bishop f3, and the bishop on g7 is the hero. So the quiet move after the queen sack. But a lot of people don't know that early in the game, Petrosian, this all started because Black procrastinated on the move d6. And that, I believe, is much more instructive than the combination, which is fairly mundane. I was also able to use this concept, or in general, like the hole on the d6 square is very prevalent in the King's Indian attack, especially. So I won a game where my opponent did the same thing. He just like never put a pawn on d6. I don't know why. He castled. I'm like, thank you very much for the bishop pair. And that bishop pair, the light squares, actually won me the game. Like the light squares plagued my opponent the entire game. And the light squared bishop was like the hero of the game. I mean, look at this position. Boom. This is a nice game, actually. This is just like devastation. And it all started because I grabbed this bishop on c8, which may not seem like a significant event, but it turned out to be very important. I think I made the point. What's important to understand is like, even if black puts a pawn on d6, it doesn't always help because the pawn is then a weakness. So you can play very concretely here, like bishop b5 check comes to mind and dc is coming next. And black's position is a disaster. I mean, black is collapsing on all fronts. Yeah, so just very straightforward. And now, like, I didn't rush to take on c5. I think this was very important. First, we put the knight on c4. Black should have played more resiliently with knight to c8. I think this was probably called for. And you just have to, like, force this move to happen. Otherwise, you're just going to get massacred. Like, if you're on the defending side here, you have to find a way to smoke your opponent's pieces out before they get too entrenched. Once this happens, like maybe here still knight c8 was the only move, but we have like queen a4, queen b3, rook d1. We can play e5 actually. Why not? So the big takeaway from this game is if there is no need to keep the pawn on d7, just play d6 and don't combine these three moves unless like the center is closed or you have a clear roadmap for how to make sure d6 is going to be defended.